Welcome everybody back to the channel. My name is Patrick, and today I'm going to run through a deal case study on a property that we wholesaled here in St. Louis, and it is in St. Louis, Missouri, 63116. If you're familiar with St. Louis, you know that's South City. And let's just dive right in because I know you guys take a lot of value from this. And to start it off, I just want to reiterate over and over and over that all of our deals, we plug through different softwares and we scrub them down for equity. We scrub them down for absentee owners. We scrub them down to a more targeted list. And we use usahousedata.com to do that. And some of the things that you can do through USA House Data is find any property owner, which you need to know the owner's name, you need to know their mailing address, you need to know other various pieces of information, and you can find the square footage, you can find the bed baths, you can run comps, you can do all kinds of things to evaluate properties to figure out if it looks like a good property for you as an investor to target. You can also use usahousedata.com to skip trace. And what skip tracing is, if you don't know, is to pull the owner's contact information, which if you're cold calling or doing any sort of outreach marketing, which on this particular deal, I did do that. I reached out to them, I cold called them on a property I found driving for dollars, and then I plugged it into usahousedata.com to find out what the equity was in the property to make sure it wasn't something I wasn't wasting time on from a wholesale perspective. If you do creative finance, the equity doesn't really matter. But you got to find all that information out, regardless of what kind of deal structure you want to do. This is just what we do typically on our wholesale deals. I plugged it into USA House Data. I seen there was only a $30-something thousand mortgage on it, $150,000 plus property. Great property to go after. It's a duplex, and I'll get into the details of the property and some pictures of it here in a second. But it also does, USA House Data also does automated list management. Now, what that is, if you're a real estate investor and you're targeting lists, you're going after pre-foreclosures, you're going after tax lien properties, tax deed properties, you're going after driving for dollars leads, you're going after distressed properties that might have some sort of problem to solve as an investor, and say that problem gets solved, or the property gets listed on the MLS, or a number of other things that could happen that you don't want to keep marketing to that property and spending money. You don't want to keep cold calling, you don't want to have your VAs reaching out, you don't want to be sending text message blasts to a property that was maybe in pre-foreclosure, but the family ended up listing it on the MLS with an agent. And automated list management inside of usahousedata.com keeps track of all that stuff for you. It updates automatically on the real time of what's going on with the property, so you do not waste any effort. There's no spinning your wheels on 10 or 20 properties out of 1,000 that were never going to be a deal for you anyways. So it's just targeted leads. So definitely check out usahousedata.com. Get started. Just check it out with a 7-day free trial. No obligation to you guys. I use it every single day in my business. So let's just dive into the deal. So how do we get this lead? Driving for dollars and a high equity absentee list. So I found this property a long time ago, driving for dollars. It was very questionable. I didn't know if there was anybody living there. It looked like somebody had taken care of it, and I'll get into the details on exactly why that was true. But I did end up reaching out to him. I put it into usahousedata.com. I found the equity position was about $37,000 out of $100 and something thousand ARV fixed up value. It's a duplex. It's a great rental property, all brick house here in South City, St. Louis. And so I just cold called him. I skip traced him through USA House Data, and I found the property owner's information. I looked him up. I noticed it was a single owner. There wasn't a bunch of joint tenants or anything going on. So I like those when they're very straightforward. There's usually one, maybe two decision makers if the person is married. In this case, he was. It was no big deal. So it took a couple calls to build rapport. This property was a labor of love. He had owned it forever, and I'll get into that here in a second. So it took a couple calls. He has kids. He was very busy. He lived 35 minutes away from the property. I found out it was vacant. There was nothing that told me it was vacant really from the outside of it. It was kind of questionable. So I still wanted to look up the equity on USA House Data, which I did, called him, had to build a rapport over a couple phone calls, and finally got the appointment. But what I want to stress on here is pre-qualifying questions. Don't overcomplicate this. I really didn't talk too much about the property when I first cold called him. I got to know him. He's an older gentleman. He's insanely nice, probably one of the top 5 most nice sellers I've ever dealt with. He's now a bird dog for us. He's a construction worker, does gutters and all kinds of construction work. He owns his own business here in St. Louis. But the cool part about that is now he's a resource for us, and we were a resource for him. We were able to provide a service for him and buy a property from him for cash so he could walk away. And we just got to know him off these first phone calls. I could tell I didn't need to start talking about the property. I could already tell right when I talked to him it was going to take a couple phone calls to get to where I needed to be on a walkthrough. So I wasn't trying to beat him up about the property. He didn't ask how I got his number. He had just told me other people reached out to him over the years. And when he told me over the years, I said, oh my gosh, well, how long have people been reaching out to you? And we start diving into the pain. And he said, oh, it's been years. I've owned this property 20 something years and I have never finished it. It's supposed to be my nest egg when I retire, and so on. And so I asked him also, okay, well, it sounds like you're the only decision maker, which he was, even though his wife did have to sign at closing. But he it was his labor of love. He bought the property, he did all the work, it was all his materials, all his expertise of being a construction worker. This was kind of his thing. And so I got that information out in the open, and I also asked him, what's your timeline to sell? When do you see this property being sold if you are to move forward with it? How does that timeline look for you? And he told me, if we can make a deal, I'll close as fast as you guys can close. So right then and there, I said, well, hey, Mr. Seller, what do I got to do to get inside this property so I can make you an offer on it? So he told me it was partially gutted. So we just knew that we had to get it up to rentable standards for the neighborhood. And I'll show you the pictures here in a second. So here's the initial appointment. What are the first things you notice? Great duplex property here in South St. Louis City. All brick. It's very solid brick building. There wasn't a single brick leaning in this entire building. The tuck pointing had been done at some point in the past while he's owned it. Some new fascia on it. It had a lot of really good things going for it. Mostly vinyl windows throughout the entire thing. It needed some gutter work. It needed some roof repairs on this and stuff on the outside. It needed a little bit of landscaping. But like you can see in the picture here, the grass, it was all cut. There was nothing really. Now you tell me, if you're driving for dollars, if you would have put this address in. I did, for whatever reason. It just looked like a great property, and it ended up having equity. We would have found this if we had just pulled a high equity absentee owner list, for sure. But if you've pulled those lists, those are tens of thousands of addresses. And I like to mix that list with a driving for dollars list and kind of stack them up and see which ones kind of are on both lists, because this one was, and it had more motivation. So I pointed that out to him. Because he really was on the fence of selling. This seller wasn't who I would call a traditional motivated seller. It really wasn't a giant lingering problem. It was just a tired landlord without tenants, so to speak. So I pointed all that out. He had been sitting on this property vacant for 26 years. Like, that's incredible. That's one of the longer ones of delusion, I want to say, and I don't want to sound arrogant or ignorant to the seller, but that's kind of delusional. If you think you're going to finish a property after it's been sitting for 26 years and you've kept the power on the whole time, you put new furnaces in it, you've done all this crazy stuff, and the furnace has never even been turned on. You've done all the work yourself, and you just never get it to the finish line. So I kept pointing all that stuff out to him. I said, well, what are the next steps for you to sign paperwork? I showed up with a couple cash buyers as well as myself, because this is a great investment property. I looked at this for buy and hold for our team here in St. Louis, and then I looked at it as a wholesale. It's kind of how we always do it. We bring multiple exit strategies along the appointment, because if you're watching this, a lot of these appointments, you get one shot at a lot of them. Unfortunately, it's just how it is. Maybe 2 or 3 if you negotiate and set the stage right. We just find that really is just complicating the deal. And so here's some more outside photos. I really didn't have time to take a lot of photos. I was too busy building rapport, building a relationship, getting to know the seller, figuring out, because he already told me on the phone, I would sell as soon as possible, as soon as you guys can close, if you can get to my price. And so my goal is to figure out what that price was. We did throw around some numbers on the phone. I mean, granted, I didn't just go into this blind. I threw out some numbers. He told me what he had into the property. He said, I have about $30,000 into the property, and I have a mortgage of about $37,000. So if I can walk with what I owe plus a little bit of money for my time, I think I'd be happy with that. So I'm just doing some math, and I threw out 60s and 70 on the phone with him before we walk the property. So it's just one of those things where we walk into this knowing we're already at about a 50% ARV on a purchase. I mean, this is a great property. So all we needed to do on this appointment was show up and make sure there wasn't a giant amount of work that we weren't prepared for. So that's what we're looking for here. And this picture on the left is looking out back at the top balcony. Beautiful detached garage. You can see the roof of it right there that has an alleyway behind it. Just a beautiful property. It has a great potential. And then here's some interior photos. You would look at these and think that these are identical. They just move some of the stuff around, but this left picture is actually the downstairs unit, and then the right picture is the upstairs unit. So they're identical up-down units on a duplex, and all the plumbing's all very stacked on top of each other. Everything is very simple on this rehab. And like I said, the guy this was a labor of love. You can see he has all the drywall, he has all the framing sitting there. He has all the cabinets and stuff sitting on the right hand side on this picture, and the floors need to be refinished. It's nothing crazy. He had most everything sitting in here to get this job done. So here's some more photos. This one on the left is the kitchen of the downstairs unit. That was probably, besides the bathrooms being gutted, that was probably the most rough looking room, which isn't even that bad. I mean, it really isn't that bad. You got to do the floors, you got to paint, you got to do some window treatments, you got to do cabinets, you got to do plumbing, you got to do everything you normally would do, electrical fixtures and a fan. And whatever else you want to do. I mean, just get creative. And this picture on the right is the walk-through bedroom. On the left here, you got 2 doors you can walk through, and then, like you see, it just needs paint, and the floors just need to be cleaned up. I know some landlords who probably wouldn't even refinish these floors. They're probably just going to sweep them and just clean them up and just leave them the way it is. This is a textbook rental neighborhood. You don't need to overcomplicate these rehabs. And then here's 2 pictures of the basement. Like I said, labor of love. The guy put some serious money into this property and just never got to the finish line. The picture on the left is all brand new ductwork he had ran a couple years back, and then the picture on the right is that ductwork connected to a brand new furnace that had never even been turned on. I mean, they've been installed probably, I think he said 3 years ago in this property, and they've never even been turned on. He kept telling me that, and he actually was getting nervous because the windows you can see on the basement are right there, and they have bars in them for sure, but like, people know in neighbors know when houses are vacant, especially when it's been almost a quarter of a century of sitting vacant. People know when they see big ticket items get installed in a property that's being worked on, the criminal juices start flowing. So he was kind of worried about somebody breaking in and stealing these things. I mean, that's, $5,000 worth of equipment when you got 2 of them. But it was really good. There was nothing crazy going on. A bunch of that stuff had already been done. Permits had been pulled. I made sure to ask him that because if they hadn't, maybe we were going to run into some issues with that. So here's the deal logistics. This picture on the right, like I said, DIY. He was doing all this stuff himself, but he was doing it right. There's everything still needs to be inspected before we get occupancy on this, but he was on the right track. He was doing everything how a rehabber should do it. He's not one of these Pinterest DIY rehabbers. He knew what he needed to do. So found this property driving for dollars, and it was on several lists. Like I said, I skip traced it. Absentee owner, high equity list. There's 2 different lists it was on right there. And it was on also a tired landlord list, which is a newer list that a lot of people are digging into these days. And if you're watching this, you've never pulled a tired landlord list. USAHouseData.com just rolled out a tired landlord box that you can check when you pull lists. So it's really powerful, and I always stack on that stuff because it's like a high sell score kind of situation where the probability, the algorithm, however it works, is saying this owner of this property probably has a more higher chance of selling or at least having some pain to listen to your offer for the property, which in this deal was exactly true. So he had been contacted by a lot of people who wanted to sell, like I said before, and for whatever reason. And one of the things that I really loved about this deal, and the seller, like I said, top 5 of nicest people I've dealt with ever in my life, as far as in real estate. He just told me flat out when we got the appointment, he goes, "Hey man, whatever you said to me on the phone, it just stuck. I could tell you guys were the real deal. You were ready to move forward. You didn't say the wrong things. You didn't beat me up. You just wanted to be nice and be my friend. And you offered to promote my business right out of the gate. I mean, do something of value, to people you're trying to do business with. Like, this is an ongoing relationship. A lot of the times these aren't one and done, boom, bang. I stole your house for 40% of what it's worth, even though you walked with some money, you think it's a win. These aren't bad transactions. This was one of those feel good transactions, and we just stood out from the crowd, which is all I could ever want on any cold call, any deal that we do. That's like my favorite thing to hear. So we walked the property one time. We put it under contract. Like I said, we had multiple offers. We had a sight unseen offer actually on this one from a out-of-state company who I know buys this exact property. It pays to know, your network is your net worth, so to speak. So it pays to know who, the right people. And I sent the pictures to this property to another buyer, made us a strong offer. They just were very short of the other offer, and I just chose who I wanted to do business with because I got to the deal first. I control the deal. I control the contract. I can do whatever I want with it. So it's a 4-bed, 2-bath, 2,300 square feet. I pull all that data from USAHouseData.com. So deal flow, found it driving for dollars. Like I said, I was on 2 lists. I dove a little deeper on it. I spent about 5 minutes total on it, just from a data side of the analysis, just because it was questionable. And I just wanted to verify that it wasn't owned by some big out-of-state company, that it wasn't in an LLC or something weird, or if it was actually vacant, what the equity was, where the mailing address was, and just other things that were going on with it, and how big it was, and just all these other things going on with it, if it had a bunch of liens or any weird stuff going on. And you can see a lot of that public lien information on USAHouseData.com. It's really cool because you start to stack avatar of what's going on with the property, and it really helps when you start to cold call people. You can have all that information in front of you. So I skip traced the owner, I called him a few times. Like I said, I built a lot of rapport with this guy. He was very easy to talk to. It's one of those people I had to cut the conversations down on the phone because it was like, hey man, I got 10, 15 minutes to talk to you, but we could talk all day. So the seller was definitely unsure at first. He had a lot of other investors waste his time, and that's a trigger phrase. I say that all the time, and I love that when somebody tells me that, because what that means is you now have the opportunity to stand out from the crowd. You now have the opportunity to not be like every other investor. You now have the opportunity to leverage his bad experiences against other people and stand out even further. It might be a little redundant, but there's a point there. And also the biggest trigger phrase, the reason that's a trigger phrase is because when somebody says that, they've done the appointment. they've done the walkthrough, they've received offers, they've also turned them down. That means they have a price anchor. That means they know what they want, they know what they don't want. And that's a huge deal because it's going to save you time not walking these properties when somebody is unsure. This particular deal or any other deal where somebody says, man, you're just like all these other investors, boom, flip that script immediately. That is one of my favorite things to hear because you can turn all of that into all the things I just said on why you can now get a number from somebody, or you can figure out if this is going to be a complete waste of time and you might fall into the other investor bucket, so to speak. And that's good because you don't want to walk properties where somebody wants $100,000, the property's worth $100,000. It just doesn't work. So when somebody's been beat up and they've been offered on this particular deal, he was offered $30,000, $35,000, and he told me that. And I said, and that's when it opens up the door for conversation to figure out, hey, how much money do you actually want to walk with this? I know, talking to you right now, Mr. Seller, that I can beat that offer. We're the real deal. We do X, Y, and Z in your market. We own X, Y, and Z down the street. Whatever you got to say to build credibility in this particular situation, it was just, I know what you're up against. Now I know what I'm up against. I know what you don't want. Now I kind of figure out what you do want. It's a very sweet web. I love that phrase whenever somebody says, I've had other investors waste my time. Don't forget that. So I got all the necessary pre-qualifying information from the seller before the appointment because of that phrase. He said other people are wasting my time, and I just flipped the script and got everything out I needed to get out. So I thought we would get this property for less. Honestly, I thought we were going to be able, because like I said, I was about to make him almost a double offer from what somebody else had made him, and he had actually entertained. I think part of me believed that he was actually debating if he was even going to be able to walk with what he had into the property and not take any profit on top for his 26 years of effort, which to me was still a fair offer. I wanted to get this property for $60,000. I'll get into the numbers here in a second. We ended up paying more, and honestly, I think he was ecstatic. So I thought we'd be able to get it for less. Still a good deal. There was no reason to not come up on this offer, especially on our offer, especially when we have other offers coming in. There's a spread on a wholesale. There's no reason to not lock that up. I know some investors would play the reluctant game, build a relationship, do the follow-up, try to lock it down. Could we have made $5,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 more on this deal? Potentially. But now I have a really qualified bird dog, somebody that I've put money in their pocket, who owns a construction company, who has already told me he's willing to find properties for us. He sends us addresses. To me, that's worth more than $10,000 of trying to complicate a relationship. Just saying. Handle your business however you want to. That's just where we were at with that. So it's a win-win deal all the way through. The actual numbers, purchase price, $70,000, $70,000. The offer from our buyer who actually walked the property with us, not the one who made the offer sight unseen, was $85,000. Our projected ARV is 150, and I put the plus in there because we run the most conservative numbers on the planet. It does absolutely nobody any good to say a property is worth more than it is, and truthfully, something's only worth as much as somebody will pay for it. So this particular investment deal was worth $85,000. To us, it was worth $70,000. We locked it up under contract for $70,000 with our buyer and sold it to them. So our estimated rehab cost was $60,000. Always budget more. This was really honestly not a complicated rehab. A lot of the materials were already there. The scope of work was kind of already easily laid out. All the demo was pretty much done except for some flooring and a couple interior doors and some stuff in the basement. So our actual profit, do the math. 85,000 minus 70 was 15 grand on a deal that I found driving for dollars. I took 5 minutes to analyze the data on usahousedata.com, figured out it was on a couple different lists, figured out there was a good chunk of equity. Looked up Skip Trace, the owner, on the same software and called him, reached out, got the first 2 phone numbers. That was him. Called him, had to play phone tag for a little bit, got to know him a little bit, walked the property, made the offer, locked it up, sold it same day, closed on it in 3 weeks. All from driving for dollars and stacking some data on USA House Data. I cannot express this enough. We probably have an entire 3 hours in this deal to make 15 grand here. So here's a picture of the check. We just picked it up the other day. $15,000 in front of the title company. The title company girls always laugh at us because we take a bunch of pictures. I think they think we're famous. So in conclusion, every seller, every house, every situation has a problem you're solving. On this deal, the seller really did. This was a kind of a unique one, which is why I wanted to do a deal case study on it. The seller really wanted to feel like we were his friends. He had already, like I said, the trigger phrase, he'd been beat up. He had been, people walked through the property and done all these other stupid things, and nobody ever took the time to get to know him. Nobody ever got the time to talk about his wife, his relationship, his family, his business. I mean, I talked about his business and his contracting experience the entire time I was at the appointment. It had nothing to, we already knew what the property needed. We already knew this was a deal. We already knew that the rehab cost was going to either be between, $45,000 and $65,000, $70,000. There's no point in trying to point point out pain when the deal's already there. Just figure out what makes more sense for every seller. And this guy, like I said, a little bit unique, such a nice guy. He wanted to deal with people he knew were legit. And it was actually funny. We showed up and we started talking numbers, and he got really anxious because we were trying to put the property on the contract right then and there. And I said, hey man, no problem. We do not have to do this right now. I can tell I'm pressuring you, but we're here. And he goes, I just didn't expect you guys to show up with bags of money. And it was a play on words because we weren't actually there with a bag of money, but we were ready to sign a contract. So ask the hard questions if there are any. Leave open loops with communications and offers, like I just said, making that offer on the spot in that property. I could tell. I mean, he got recluse. He did this. It got really kind of uncomfortable. I was even uncomfortable because he was uncomfortable. So that's all stuff you got to read. So this deal is pretty straightforward with repairs, sellers, wants, needs, and for doing business. And would I do this deal again? Absolutely. All day, every day. And there's a ton more in the pipeline. So check out the next one. Subscribe. Hope you guys like deal case studies. Check out usahousedata.com. I use it every single day in my business. 7-day free trial at that link. It'll be in the descriptions.